Hey everyone, today I want to talk to you about a book that really shifted my perspective, titled 10 Happier by Dan Harris. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably have a constant monologue going on in your head, right? That inner voice that just never shuts up. Well, Dan Harris, a longtime news anchor, originally wanted to call his book, The Voice in My Head is an Asshole. And honestly, once you dive in, you'll totally get why. Dan's journey begins with a pretty spectacular and nationally televised meltdown. Imagine being on live TV, trying to read the news, and suddenly feeling like you're being stabbed in the brain with raw animal fear, a paralyzing wave of panic washing over you. That's exactly what happened to him. This wasn't a one-off either, it happened again a year later, cutting right through the anti-anxiety medication he was taking. He realized his career, everything he'd worked for, was on the line. So what was going on? Dan's doctor eventually diagnosed it as depression and linked it to his frequent cocaine use, which increased adrenaline levels and dramatically upped the odds of panic attacks. He admits he'd been sleepwalking through a cascade of moronic behavior, from maniacally pursuing airtime to cavalierly going into war zones without considering the psychological impact, and using drugs for a synthetic adrenaline squirt. He knew he needed to make changes beyond just quitting drugs. He started with psychotherapy, but it felt limited, leaving him with understanding without relief. This sent him on a quest into the world of self-help gurus. He first stumbled upon Eckhart Tolle, whose book, A New Worth, intrigued him with its description of the voice in your head that's ceaseless, often negative and self-referential chatter that dominates our lives. Tolle argues this is our ego, our sense of I. Dan felt like Tolle was describing his inner world perfectly, even recalling how that voice had nudged him towards bad decisions like throwing papers in the air or shouting matches with protesters. But Tolle also made wild pseudoscientific claims and offered very little practical advice. Dan was left wondering if Tolle was a genius or a lunatic. Then came Deepak Chopra, another self-help superstar. Dan tried to get practical advice from him, but Chopra's answers were often steeped in impenetrable spiritual patois. Dan noticed a stark contradiction. Chopra preached effortless spontaneity and being permanently present, yet was constantly on his BlackBerry, devouring articles on his Kindle, and lobbying reporters to follow him on Twitter. It didn't strike Dan as the actions of a man living in perfect harmony. He was still searching for a fire extinguisher, as he put it, for his hero of Firemind. His Happiness Inc. investigation into the unregulated $11 billion self-help industry revealed the parade of the unctuous and the unqualified. He met figures like Joe Vitale, a proponent of The Secret and the Law of Attraction, which suggested you could get anything by thinking about it. But Vitale admitted it also required action, which Dan pointed out was glaringly obvious. Even worse was James Arthur Ray, who claimed his methods made him rich and never sick, only for 3 of his followers to die in a sweat lodge ceremony he presided over. This confirmed to Dan that the scene was not for him. So where did he turn? His wife, Bianca, introduced him to the work of Dr. Mark Epstein, a psychiatrist and practicing Buddhist. This was a game changer. Dan realized the best parts of Tolle's teachings were, in fact, Anatripas Buddhism. Epstein explained that Buddhism wasn't necessarily a religion but more of a philosophy, and you didn't have to believe in reincarnation or psychic powers to benefit. It had entered psychologists since Freud's day and had even been embraced by the mental health community. A core Buddhist concept that resonated with Dan was impermanence. In a world where everything is constantly changing, we suffer because we cling to things that won't last. This challenged his father's motto of the price of security is insecurity, making him realize that if security was an illusion anyway, why bother with the insecurity? But you might ask, doesn't Buddhism, with its emphasis on letting go and non-attachment, just lead to passivity? That was Dan's concern too. He worried it would make him lose his edge. The practical answer came in the form of mindfulness, Buddhism's secret sauce. Mindfulness is the ability to recognize what's happening in your mind: anger, jealousy, sadness, pain, without getting carried away by it. It creates space between stimulus and response, allowing you to respond rather than simply react. This was a huge revelation for him, a superpower. He learned a technique called RAIN: recognize, allow, investigate, non-identification from teacher Tara Brach. which helped him process his own anxieties. Meditation itself, Dan found, was diabolically hard. It wasn't about clearing the mind, but rather a rigorous brain exercise of repeatedly bringing your attention back to the breath. He describes it as rep after rep of trying to tame the runaway train of the mind. Despite the difficulty, he experienced breakthroughs like choiceless awareness, where he could simply observe thoughts and sensations rising and passing with clarity. The science caught up, providing further validation. Research from Harvard and Yale showed that meditation could literally rewire your brain, thickening gray matter in areas associated with self-awareness and compassion, while shrinking regions linked to stress. This led to a new paradigm called neuroplasticity. The brain can change in response to experience, meaning happiness is a skill that can be trained. This helped his skeptical mother embrace meditation after seeing the Harvard study. Meditation also started infiltrating unlikely places. Corporations like General Mills and Google, even the US Marines, they weren't calling it spiritual, they were calling it the new caffeine. A way to enhance focus, creativity, and leadership. Janice Martirano at General Mills explained that multitasking is a myth, and purposeful pauses, even brief ones, can lead to better decision-making and creativity by allowing the unconscious mind to work. But what about compassion? You might wonder, isn't that just fluffy, unhelpful stuff? Dan initially resisted meta-loving kindness meditation, feeling it was annoying and unnatural, but science again proved him wrong. Studies showed compassion meditation reduced stress hormones and increased brain activity in regions associated with empathy. It even made people demonstrably nicer. This provided a self-interested case for not being a dick. One of the most valuable insights came from his friend Mark Epstein. The Zen. In competitive environments like TV news, appearing too zen could be seen as weakness. Mark explained that acceptance is not passivity. You can still be assertive and effective without being an asshole. This meant being able to compete aggressively, plead your own case, or even have a sharp word with someone, but doing so calmly and without making it personal. Finally, the ultimate piece of the puzzle, non-aptitude to results. Dan learned that while it's natural for ambitious people to strive hard, the key is not to be attached to the outcome. You do everything you can to succeed, but if things don't go your way, you're resilient enough to bounce back without being devastated. This, he realized, was enlightened self-interest. So for Dan, meditation wasn't about achieving a magical state of enlightenment, though he became more agnostic and open to the idea by the end. It was about becoming 10 happier. This simple, relatable slogan resonated because it was catchy, true, and didn't overpromote. It represented a significant return on investment, less reactivity, less rumination, and a greater capacity for self-generated happiness. Regardless of external circumstances, ultimately, 10 Happier is a refreshingly honest account of a skeptical journalist's journey to find practical tools for managing his mind and emotions. It's a reminder that happiness and kindness aren't fixed traits, but skills that can be cultivated, making us more resilient, focused, and yes, even nicer without losing our drive. It's truly a useful and illuminating read.